right, and preparing to roll the intro. And intro will be done in 3, 2, 1. All right, everybody, welcome to Vodcast, the podcast in video format, aka Vodcast. Sit on back, relax, get your comfy socks on, grab a cup of joe, or a cup of hot chocolate, or a cup of something maybe a little stronger if you need. I don't know. How's your day been? And we're gonna have an episode. So, got Richie Swift here with me on today's episode. I think we're gonna talk about our favorite movies. But before we get into that, Richie, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you, Corbin?
I'm doing well. Had a couple late nights, couple early mornings, but you know, I would bet, and correct me if I'm wrong in the comments below, but I would bet almost everybody at home feels the same, so I can't complain, right?
I feel it.
Yeah.
You know, coming back from work and getting ready for the vodcast. I mean, living the dream, man. Living the dream.
That's right. We got to have that pump up energy. Let's go, everybody. Nah, I don't know. I don't feel like we have to be too pumped up on the vodcast, right? Because like it's that mood you expect. You expect something chill for like a vodcast like this, right? I like that. I've actually noticed that lately, you know. This is completely a separate subject, but I'll go ahead and mention it because it came to mind. But I've noticed lately that there are these different genres of almost like YouTubers or like content creators. And maybe it's my old age, ripe old age of 28. But maybe it's not. I'm not sure. But I've noticed that there are certain YouTubers that I follow now lately that are just so much calmer. Like they're never hyped in their videos. They're just, and it's not that they're upset or anything. They're just, hey guys, how's it going? Let me show you what I'm doing today. And I love their content. And like they have good personalities, of course, because I think that's a key to any of this. But they're not hyped up. And then like there are some that I follow that I enjoy. Mr. Beast, obviously, like classic example. It's like hype, and it's like, oh, this is fun. But maybe I'm just getting to that point in my life now where I'm calming down a little bit, and so I'm just not, I don't need that as much. I don't know.
I feel it. I've been noticing that trend as well. I think for a while there, probably back in 2015, 16-ish, there was a trend of being much louder, a lot more energetic. And granted, there's still people that are the embodiment of that.
Mm-hmm.
But there has been a lot of people who are more low-key getting the spotlight too, kind of bringing that chilled vibe, as you were saying before. So
it gives me
I've
hope.
been noticing that.
Gives me hope.
From one soft-spoken brother to another.
Yeah,
we got this.
See, I don't know if I would say that I'm soft-spoken or not, but I'm definitely not like hyped. I feel like I'm just down to earth, and a lot of times the hype doesn't feel down to earth. It's like, and
yeah,
it not that it's dishonest or anything. Like they're probably genuinely like really hyped up people. I would picture Mr. Beast as being the type of person who is just constantly like, yeah, I'm so excited about life and everything,
Yeah.
Not that he would always be that way. Nobody's always one way or another. They change, people are dynamic beings.
Yeah.
And so,
at least I would hope so.
Well, yeah, that's true. Sounds exhausting to be hyped up all 24/7. So, I don't know. It's just a fascinating thing I've been noticing, and I think that this format is perfect for that too.
I agree.
So,
Agree.
Anyway, before we get too far along, I guess we should dive into the topic in the title of our video so that our beloved fans, viewers at home, and those watching this live stream after can find out what they came here to know, what they desperately need to know.
They've been sending me letters, they've been sending me emails. Some of them have been straight up paging me, dude. It's pretty crazy.
Any carrier pigeons?
I care. Who? Just two.
Just two. You might check the window. I think I hear it pecking. No.
Oh shoot! Look, there's another one.
Smoke signals. I don't even know how you do smoke signals.
Look at that. Ooh. Smoke signals.
Any way they can possibly send you this question. They want to know, what are your top 3 favorite movies? And then they want to know what are mine, but like more importantly, they want to know what are yours. So
Oh yeah, absolutely. Everyone knows that I am definitely the only host of Cafe Vodcast, but
that's true.
I'm just kidding, everyone. I want to be. I'm getting into my Richie Swift persona right there. But my 3 favorite movies. I think it might be a good idea if we trade off one after another.
I'm
so
down.
We're not going to monologue because I can definitely get monologue when it comes to this stuff. Because I do enjoy film. Granted, I haven't seen every movie known to man. In fact, there is many times that there's certain movies that people will either reference or talk about, and I'll be like, well, I haven't seen that movie.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, at work, had coworkers talking about the movie Step Brothers, and I said, I have not seen it yet. And they were completely baffled, aghast, if you will. And
How
they were
dare
pretty
you?
much like,
Doesn't that have
rock?
the Will Ferrell in it?
The Will
And
Ferrell, yes.
The John somebody? I
C.
don't know.
Riley?
Yeah, that one. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it has them. And a lot of people say it's one of the best comedies. But I'm getting a little too off topic. Point is I haven't seen every movie. And
That's good. That's good. I'm glad that you have spent some time in your life not watching movies, because if you had spent all of your life watching movies, I'd be a little concerned for you.
Hey, that's what Quentin Tarantino did, and he's like a highly respected director now.
True.
But I'll start with my all-time favorite movie. And I'll try to keep it as brief as I can because, again, I can talk about this for hours. And it's actually the poster that sadly fell behind me over there. You could kind of see it
Jelly
on
on.
the ground.
Yeah, I love Jelly on.
It's a Neon Genesis Evangelion, specifically the film The End of Evangelion. And it's a pretty crazy movie, I gotta say. It's not to be a standalone, actually. It's supposed to be the ending of the TV series of the same name, Neon Genesis Evangelion.
Interesting.
And it's very psychological, it's action-packed, and definitely psychological. I say it twice because it is very psychological. Very abstract. It's a very out there movie, but that's the reason why I get so attracted to it, because I have never seen anything like it, and nor do I think I'm ever going to see anything like it, so it has to be like one of the top. But someone asked me recently, and it's a very good question, and that's, is it your favorite movie because it does things technically right, or because it hits a lot of personal check boxes that you like to see in movies? And and that's an interesting point, because I can say that there's some movies that I think everyone can be like, well, everyone's biased when it comes to their favorite movies. Not everyone's a perfect critic, right? If we were perfect critics, there would be no perfect movie, period.
Nor would there be any need for critics.
That's true. That's true. But I was going to say that and there's personal boxes that some people want to see in movies and stuff like that, and that would be more like selfish and stuff, and that's how you get more favoritisms and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I am pretty confident when I say that it does the technical, and it also does the personal perfectly.
Nice.
And so, yeah, that was a couple things. Corbin, do you have to go for a moment?
What? Love you, bye.
All right.
I don't know what you're talking about. Nobody peeked their head in the door.
Oh my gosh, it's another special guest episode. I'm kidding.
All right, and that's been our special guest. Right there.
For people who are just listening to the audio, Corbin's wife peeked her head through just to say that she loves her husband Corbin dearly.
That was very nice.
So
Touched my
basically,
heart.
but yeah, it does a lot of the technical stuff
Nice.
darn near perfect. Like everything about the movie is just so good. It's so well directed and stuff, and it's because it's my favorite director, Hideaki Anno.
Nice.
He's very much like George Lucas, especially back in his heyday, where he likes to tell the story visually. Like he understands the visual medium of film.
Nice.
Hideaki Anno is a good he's a good writer as well though. Hideaki Anno is a great writer, and he has a lot of talented people help write with him. So the story is always engaging, and the visuals are always top tier, even though it's like an old TV show, cartoon, anime, if you will, from the 90s. It still looks darn good. And, you know, sometimes the reputation of old cartoons in general, and especially animes, is that they cut a lot of corners, and in a way it does too, but it always makes it look good, like no matter what.
Is it really cutting corners though if you have like such limited technology? Because like they may not have been cutting corners. It may have been just that the time limitations and the technological limitations forced some visual limitations that today feel like, oh, you're just skipping out on some easy things that you could have done to change that.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I feel it. So, but the bottom line though is that it looks fantastic.
That's good.
There's a lot of people that say to this day that the end of Evangelion is one of the best animated films, especially in the traditional standard, ever made.
Interesting.
Just purely from the visual standpoint. I even have a whole channel on Discord, and to people who don't know what Discord is, it's not too important, I'll say. But there's this whole channel where like there's these frames, is what they call them, frames, individual like pictures from this movie, and I post it all the time because they're it actually daily. But it's because, like, sincerely, it's very much like Stanley Kubrick, where every single shot, every single object in the shot is purposeful. There's nothing wasted in the movie, and that is really cool to think about and to visually see, because I can tell you, like most of the movies that I've seen, you don't even have to be looking at the screen half the time. You could literally just hear what they're saying, and they'll tell you exactly what's happening, and then that's it. And it's like, well, that kind of the reason why I'm watching a movie is because it's an audio visual experience, and sometimes the visuals are just not important in the way that it should be to certain directors, I'll say. But Hideaki Anno knows this, so he makes every shot mean something, and the sound design is so just on point too. Just understanding the medium to an absolute T, and just makes it so engaging, and it's so good. It's just so good, man. And my last thing I'll mention is that it directly, and I mean this sincerely, it directly influenced Avengers Endgame, because funny enough, it is pretty much the same movie. Not Endgame, my apologies, Infinity War, actually. Okay. Infinity War kind of like just watched the end of Evangelion and said, I'm going to do that. So
that's awesome.
But as a warning, there's a lot of warnings that need to be along with this film though. Lot, because it's not like Infinity War where it's like, I'll say this stuff that is similar to Infinity War, and that's Infinity War is a fantastic movie, but you need to have the context of the beginning things previously to understand it fully, because it's almost like a climax of a film.
Yeah.
And that's very much the same with the end of Evangelion. You cannot watch it without understanding all the stuff that happened before, because you'll be lost.
Mm.
And in fact, even if you have seen the series, sometimes you will feel lost. And this is what I mean by the warning. It is off the wall, man. It is insane to watch, and it's very much a hard R, by the way. It's a hard R, so be very vigilant of that too. There's a lot of blood, gore, sexual imagery, not for the sake of being sexual,
Right.
but again, like I said, it's psychological. So a lot of this stuff has like symbolism, and it also has like, even though I'm not a huge fan of Sigmund Freud, it has a lot of Freudian ideas into it to kind of give the plot and the story some, little spice, if you will. It's very psychological. Like if you're a psychology major, you'll probably be like, "Whoa, this guy who made it is severely depressed." And it's like, yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's very true, actually. But yeah, it actually is a film that gets a bad reputation for being incredibly dark,
Yeah.
because a lot of crazy stuff happens, and a lot of people miss the overarching like point of the whole film. And literally like 90% of the film is like super dark and almost seems like there's like just constant bombardment of just insanity. But then like the whole last like 5 to 10 minutes is literally like some of the most peaceful and like wonderful like things to ever happen. But people always get so confused and blindsided by the darkness that they'll be like, man, that was such a dark and gritty film. And it's like, did you not miss the whole point at the ending of it that pretty much said life is worth living? You have to find happiness. Happiness exists and stuff like that. And it's like, no, the ending of the movie and the whole point of the film is actually an positive pro-life, and I mean pro-life as in like not the political sense. Let me
Right.
clarify. Pro-life as in pro-living. Like, if you're depressed, there is a point on living. If you are feeling like there's no hope, there is hope. There's definitely hope. You need to understand oneself. It's like weird stuff that you would never think that a film would like tell you, but it just tells you it, and it like shows you how to like live that life and stuff, and it's just really cool. So
That's awesome.
with all of that in mind, that is my favorite film, Neon Genesis Evangelion, the end of Evangelion. So
Wow. Well, that is impressive.
a lot, I know, and that's only scratching the surface. I can go frame by frame, if you will, and be like, this is cool, now this is cool. You hear that sound effect? Boom.
Now I feel bad for my favorite movie because it's like I don't know nearly that much about it. It's just my favorite,
Just go for it, man. Go for it.
So my favorite movie is kind of an odd pick, and it's just been my favorite for so long that I feel weird picking anything else at this point. And I still think it holds that spot. But it's actually Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events with Jim Carrey. That movie is just... It's the first time I remember watching a movie and just being kind of like, wow, this is like... It's visually emotional. It's like... It's got kind of a dark side to it, but it's still, it had a dark side to it, but it's still humorous. And it it kind of blew my mind a little bit to watch it the first time. I was like, wow, there's something going on here that is so different from anything I've ever seen before. And so it quickly became my favorite movie. And then I watched it over and over, and I learned it's incredibly quotable. The visuals just look so good. I still think that movie would hold up today. Like the things that they did to make it, I think it came out in 2005 or somewhere around there. The things that they did to make it look the way that it did hold up now because they didn't try to overextend themselves, I think. You know, like you'd see a scene that might be in a small set. Well, they made it purposely feel like a small set, not just, you know, like, hey, we don't have the budget to do this, so we're going to try to make it feel bigger than it really is. They just didn't, you know. And so there's just so many things about that movie that when I watch it, I'm like, wow, this is a crazy movie with like so many different pieces going on. And, you know, I don't have as many like deep reasons for why it's my favorite, but it was the first time I watched a movie like that and I was like, wow, this is mind-boggling to me. I don't really know why.
Hey, I mean, everyone's favorite is a favorite for personal reasons. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
I don't know what to tell you.
It's like it's not one of those movies that you'd look at it and you go, wow, this is the best movie ever made. I don't think it's the best movie ever made. It is my favorite movie though. And like those are very different things, you know, because like I can respect the amount of work that goes into making something like, I don't know, Gladiator or like, I don't know, what's another one? The Godfather or something, like movies that, you know, people would call like the greatest movies of all time. I respect what goes into those, but I don't enjoy them as much. And like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's just what it is, you know?
I was about to say, I want to very much grasp back into that idea that you said that my favorite and the best movie are two different things. And I'm very glad that you say that because a lot of people will literally think those like are the same thing.
Yeah.
And I don't get it. And it's so funny when people are like, my favorite movie is this. And then people in the comment section be like, bro, that's like the worst choice. It's not even a good movie. And it's like, what's the... I literally said it's my favorite. I didn't say it's the best.
Exactly. Like they are just very, very different things. Because like there is a technical aspect to which a movie can be like really great. And like, you know, it took a ton of work to create, to produce. And I'm not saying that like A Series of Unfortunate Events didn't take a ton of work to produce. It absolutely did. But at the same time, like I just somehow for some reason in my mind it doesn't fit up there with like the best movies ever made. Even though it is easily my favorite and like I would recommend it to almost anybody. And
for sure.
I think that's going to kind of be the theme of all of my favorite movies. If that makes sense, because like none of them I think are really in that in their own way though, in their own genres. I think to an extent they will be, but yeah, A Series of Unfortunate Events, just I don't know, I had never read the books when I watched it, so I didn't have that going into it. I know some people were disappointed by the movie because it changes some things that happen in the books, but as a standalone thing without ever reading the books, I thought it was amazing. So
yeah, for sure. And it's actually funny because going back into like thinking of the best movies of all time, you know how a lot of people always said the Citizen Kane of blank, the Citizen Kane was always highly regarded as the best film ever made. And it was the #1 movie in Rotten Tomatoes. But I think it was fairly recently, within the past year or two, they found a critic in the 70s who actually did not give it a good score. So it actually knocked it down, I think, a step or two in the Rotten Tomatoes. And do you know what's the #1 movie right now, according to Rotten Tomatoes? Paddington 2.
Oh no. How can that be? I mean, I guess I won't knock it till I try it, but the thing is, like, nothing about that movie makes me want to watch it. That's why I don't trust critics, man.
So yeah, Paddington 2, according to Rotten Tomatoes, is the greatest film ever made.
All time.
So,
oh my gosh.
But no, let me segue into my second favorite movie.
Is it Paddington 2?
No, that's just the best film. It's not my favorite. It's not my favorite film. It's just the best film. So,
Well, you know, Paddington
but
2, second favorite movie. Like, there's a 2 theme going on.
it's my second favorite movie, but it's the greatest movie of all time. No, but my second favorite movie is actually K-On! The movie. Um,
Nice.
and don't worry, everyone. My top three are not going to be all anime, but two of them are. I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm
Why are you apologizing? This is your list. You're fine.
No, it's supposed to be the greatest films of all time. It's not supposed to be my favorites. Just kidding.
No, no,
No,
no.
but
Title
but
says your
K-On!
top 3, not the greatest
Uh,
movies of all time.
oh, but if we said the greatest of all time, I'm pretty sure a lot of people would come in and debate us instantly.
Let's go maybe next time.
Maybe next time. But no, it's K-On! The movie. It's another one of those where there's a TV show attached to it. But I actually do think that you could watch this one standalone.
Hmm.
Um, albeit it won't be as emotionally engaging
Hmm.
as if you were to watch the series. The series itself is another one of those where I think it's near flawless. The
Nice.
only thing that stops it from being like a 10, in my opinion, is that it actually was derived from a book, a comic, if you will. I want to say the official name is a manga, but I want to say comic and like story book, just to kind of make sure I don't alienate too many people. um, but the original work had a lot of it had some tropes that tried to, the director is one of my also favorite directors ever. Hideaki Anno is like number one, and Naoko Yamada is a close second, if not tied. And she's actually an animator who like debuted, had her directorial debut with K-On! And she instantly made like a ton of like awards because of how good the
Nice.
show was. And it's one of those that the show and the movie both go hand in hand, is almost the complete opposite of Neon Genesis Evangelion. And with like, because Evangelion's my favorite show and movie, and their story is so like fast paced. It's supposed to make you super engaged. You're like, what's the next mystery? So mysterious. Gotta find out what happens next. Gotta find out what happens next. Psychological, crazy stuff happens. And K-On! Is literally, by definition, slice of life. That's what they call this genre, where it's almost like the mundane day-to-day life. But if you're thinking, oh, that must mean it's a drama, then it is not. There is almost no conflict whatsoever.
Huh.
In fact, it's almost like watching YouTube videos as a TV series,
Interesting.
because like it is a slice of life, which is like just taking like the mundane technical stuff that happens in real life and just like shows it. And I could talk a lot more about Naoko Yamada, because she's just a genius when it comes to animating. She just knows her stuff. In an interview, someone said, "Oh, the way you animate and you direct, it's so like down to earth, and it's like it like has women be feminine without being unapologetic about it, and also being like, yeah, there's no crazy conflict or anything. You're just living the life. It's so chill, it's so nice, so wonderful." It's like, how do you even make that work? Like, most people would just make it so boring that no one would want to watch, but it's still entertaining. How? And it's like, how do you like direct this way? And her response was, well, first you need to accept everything as it is. And I was just like, oh my gosh, that's so brilliant, dude. So the way she directs is pretty much like she is like an observer. She observes life. She observes people and how they interact with one another, even down to the subtle movements. And her main thing is legs.
Hmm.
She says that you know how people like look at each other's eyes and they'll show the true emotions that their words will never say. She believes it's the same thing with legs and how like body language and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And like the final shot of K-On! The movie is actually like a 30 plus second just close not close up, making it seem like it's weird, but it's a shot of like the four main girls walking together, and you just see each of their legs and you know exactly who each is, because like Naoko Yamada is just so a master of writing and animating characters that you just know who's who, even though it's like legs.
That's
It's like,
bizarre.
how do you do that? It's like, well, because you have them walk a specific way. You
Yeah.
have them interact with each other in different ways. And it's like, I don't know very many directors who will be able to pull that off,
Yeah.
more or less, as just incredibly. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, you can pull it off and make it, like, okay, but, like, she does it in a way that just makes it seem so magical. Makes it seem so, like, real and grounded. And it's really, like, almost kind of surreal, but it's about a band, a girl band that, funny enough, actually has like albums and stuff like that out too. And that music is freaking incredible, by the way. It's like one of my favorite bands. Like it's legit, like great music too.
Would you ever cover one of their songs?
If I were to, I would post it on YouTube though, probably in English translation or something like that.
Really?
Um, uh,
How interesting.
dang, it would be crazy if I did it twice, though. Ooh, oh, that's a hint there for people who are Richie Swift followers.
Oh, snap.
Another one's coming soon.
Nice.
But but yeah, I love that band, and it's literally it's one of those movies that actually, in a way, parodies and in a way like pulls it off really well. Because the whole show can be kind of connected to the old school like 1960s where the Monkees had their own TV show. So did the Beatles too, where it's like a band and they have like their cartoon art alter egos and they like would perform in like places and stuff like that. It's like that's the TV show, right? The Big Time Rush is a little bit closer of a modern incarnation of that idea of like a band that has a TV show. It's supposed to be like comedic and also like showcase the band members and showcase the music too. It's kind of the same thing, although this is like the anime version and it actually is just incredibly directed, period. And the movie itself is kind of like taking some of those tropes that you would get in those band like movies, where they're like for instance the Beatles, when they were making the movie Help, they're like, oh, we're going to the Bahama. Oh, not Help. Sorry, my apologies. It is Help. Yes, it is Help. So in Help, they're like, oh, we're gonna go to the Bahamas, and we're also gonna be performing in the Bahamas and stuff like that. So, like, they have that trope, and these girls that are based in Japan are like, oh, we're going to go to Britain, so we're going to or we're going to London specifically. So it's like they fly to London and stuff, and they go into like, oh look, we're having to perform in this little club in a sushi shop type thing, where it's just like they do like some of those similar tropes, but the characters and stuff are just so charismatic and they're so entertaining to watch that like it works. And not to mention, I even showed the first scene to my best friend Dylan, and he's not interested in the show whatsoever. But point is that I showed him like the first scene, which is a partial comedic one, and even he noticed. He was like, this looks really good. And it's like, yeah, it does look really good because it's animated like incredibly. It's
Nice.
another like really well crafted movie.
Hmm.
The animation's on point, and they actually. This is another quick aside that I'll mention about Naoko Yamada. Is when she animates, and she does this with a couple of her movies that she's worked on TV shows. Is she likes to make it seem so realistic that she'll animate it as if it was being held by hand.
Nice.
So like in that first scene, like it almost seems like there's a slight shaky cam, and
Hmm.
there's some like lens flares and stuff like that that you would not normally get from a 2D drawing, of course.
Right.
So like she would purposely make it seem like there's like someone holding the camera and they're having like slight movement because they're human, because they're holding the camera and stuff, and then they'll have like in the same shot someone zoomed in right here, and then it'll go to the foreground and this person zoomed in and it's blurry back there. And it's like that is so hard to do in traditional animated movies
Right.
that like she was just like, yeah, let's do it because I want to make this like really good. And it's like, oh my gosh, you're insane, but it's so good. The subtle stuff like that just sometimes blows my mind. It makes me so happy to see. So yeah, it's really engaging, even though there's hardly a plot to it. Character interactions is just beautiful at a point. Animated really good, and the music is just fantastic too. So I mean, like I'm making it's almost seeming like number one and number two can be interchangeable, but it's not the case. I could talk about Evangelion and K-On! For hours and hours and hours, and this is where I have to stop myself because I could still keep going. Again, it's another one of those movies where I can go scene by scene and be like, this is what they're doing here, and this is why it's so cool, and this is why it works, and So I'll just leave it at that. So.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, for me, my second, again, less technical reasons, more just because, mine, I guess, are more like emotional reasons to an extent. Although, like, yours are too, because it's not like just because it's technical, you don't like it for emotional reasons. You know what I mean? Like, both of those things can go hand in hand.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
it triggers a different emotional response because it's really technically well done, I feel like.
Well,
Does that make
I would
sense?
say, yeah, in a way, like with K-On! It's a lot more like it's so technically good that it makes me like really excited and like
Mm-hmm.
energized to watch. But like when it comes to Evangelion, that's like
Yeah,
so
I guess that
deeply
is
personal. Actually,
psychological, yeah.
yeah, a lot more psychological. It has to do with a lot with like mental illness and stuff like that. And it's always one of those things with Evangelion is people will watch it and they'll get it or they don't.
Hmm.
And a lot of people who don't get it usually come out of it really aggravated. Like, what the F did I just watch? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that. They say, what the heck do I watch? Did I just watch and stuff like that? And and for people who like understand what's being said and stuff like that, they'll be like, whoa, I
Yeah.
can't believe you are able to portray all of that like that. So I'm making it seem a lot more technical, but I will say that probably a lot more emotion to Evangelion than K-On! But like both of them, I am pretty emotionally engaged with those as well. But
Nice.
yeah, and I very much appreciate the technical, but I really get if I'm not, it could be technically a masterpiece, right? But
Mm-hmm.
if I don't care emotionally, it'll just be okay. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I'll probably say, yeah, that's a pretty good movie. But if I didn't care, then it's like, well, yeah, it'll just be an okay movie. A really well made one, sure, but I don't know.
That makes sense. Hmm. Yeah, so my second one, it's a little bit of an odd choice. Has a great score, great special effects, um, amazing director, and it's Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace.
Interesting.
I'm
You're the sec. Continue. Sorry.
I'm gonna call that one my second favorite movie of all time, and
Interesting.
it's
Okay.
actually moved up in its rankings in the last few years for me. Um, maybe due to the sequel trilogy being, in my opinion, subpar.
Sure.
Not living up to the standard. To be fair, I do love The Force Awakens. I thought The Force Awakens was a great tribute to the original trilogy.
Yeah.
And so I appreciated it for that. Is the next two that were just kind of, they lacked that magic that Star Wars holds, I feel like. And maybe it was the lack of George Lucas. Maybe it was a lot of different things. But I felt like those last two, compare, if you will, The Phantom Menace to the last two Star Wars movies. And think about like the differences real quick between those two. The Phantom Menace is much more lighthearted, much more fun, much more like, I would almost say traditional sci-fi than those other two are. And it to me it boils down to like when you think traditional sci-fi, you start to see like some weird things that don't necessarily make sense. Things like characters like Jar Jar. I can't think of any new character in the sequel trilogy that has a Jar Jar-esque like memorability factor. I don't know if that's a word, but we're gonna make it a word. Where it's like, even though he's a character that most people hate, you still remember him, right? And like, he's a character that's goofy and silly, but that's not all of it. Like, for one, I loved Qui-Gon. For two, the whole movie is just a masterpiece in and of itself. Coming back from like a 20-year hiatus or whatever almost, and coming out with that movie is just crazy. I guess George Lucas worked on other things in between there, but for the Star Wars franchise.
Sure.
But it goes even like deeper than that, in that like it is a pretty emotional thing for me, and that like it's the first movie I ever remember my dad taking me to at the theaters.
Mm.
And like watching it in theaters, it just blew my mind, and it was like, wow, this is amazing. This is crazy. I can't believe what I'm seeing right now. Like, it just blew my mind. And so for me, watching that movie, having that emotional response really like solidified it in my mind. Then growing up a little more, I started to like the Clone Wars and then Revenge of the Sith more. I still think Revenge of the Sith is one of the best Star Wars movies of all time. But again, best versus favorite. I would have to say The Phantom Menace. Now, I will say that like, while I compare it to the sequel trilogy, and I sound like I'm dissing pretty hard on the sequel trilogy, I hope that the sequel trilogy does that for some kids in the same way. Like, where it's like, this was the first movie my dad took me to. Maybe like, this is the first movie their dad took them to. And like, maybe the sequel trilogy has that same emotional response for some kids. But to me, it just didn't. And so I don't want to sound like I'm hating on it, because like, everybody can be a fan of whatever they want to be, right? But I just feel like that movie had some magic that the Star Wars genre has kind of like almost missed since then. And I do think Clone Wars and Revenge of the Sith carried some of that too. Less in Revenge of the Sith, more in Clone Wars. But yeah, I don't know.
Clone Wars, like the TV show?
No, Attack of the Clones.
Attack of the Clones, okay.
Yeah. I'm calling it
because
the
I mean,
wrong
that
thing.
TV show is really good too.
Oh yeah, people love the show. Actually, oddly enough, I love Rebels and have never been able to get into Clone Wars.
Interesting.
I know.
Sometimes
it's
very much the opposite.
I know, it's weird. I don't know why it is that way, but it just is. I started watching Rebels, and I mean, really, Thrawn is one of the coolest villains of all time in any genre of any series.
I was going to say, I think Thrawn was actually an old Star Wars book character
Mm-hmm.
from like the 80s.
Yeah,
Like,
there's a whole different thing about that too. He actually was originally written by Timothy Zahn. It's the author, and
he
when
sounds like a Star Wars character. I'm sorry.
right, and when Disney bought the Star Wars franchise, they turned all of that into like, what do they call it, extended universe or something. Like it's separate from the canon, if you will, of Star Wars. But they started hiring authors to write new Star Wars books, and they hired Timothy Zahn to write Thrawn again. So he wrote the same character, 10, 20 years apart, but in a new series. It's really interesting. Some of the best books, by the way, but I digress. We're not talking about books. Yeah, oh yeah. Some of the best Star Wars books I've ever read, because they actually read and feel like real books, where some of them just feel like, it's like, oh, it's sci-fi, we don't have to try or something. I don't know.
Yeah, some of those old Star Wars books really did seem like fan fiction by definition.
Exactly. Some of the new ones still do. I don't know. Don't hate me, anybody watching this, but the Ahsoka book is one of those. It's like the only cool thing that happened in that book, or the only thing of value, was like it tells you how she got her white lightsabers. It's like, give me more.
Wow.
You can do more. That character is dope. You can do more with that character.
That's funny. I was going to say, let's continue the Star Wars train going, because funny enough, before we even started the podcast, this was number 3.
Oh, let's go.
Empire Strikes Back.
Nice. I almost picked one of the originals, but it just doesn't have the same, like, it doesn't hold the same place in my heart as Phantom Menace. But anyway.
Yeah, fair enough.
Tell us more. Empire, huh?
I was going to say, Empire Strikes Back, so good, man. Because it's one of the best examples of how to do a sequel right.
Nice.
Because a lot of the times, a lot of people would be like, let's capitalize on what made the first one special, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they'll translate to corporate people as in, let's do the same things that people liked in the first one. What's the thing that people thought was the most popular? Let's do that again. And in fact, it's not what made it special, it's what made it popular. And that's two different things, I believe. And so the original Star Wars movie, and I always like to call it Star Wars because I like to just talk about like the name that it was released as.
Yeah.
I understand if people who say A New Hope, but I just prefer the name Star Wars.
I prefer the name Episode 4.
Sometimes I just say 4, so, but, so the original Star Wars movie came out, and they didn't know if it was even going to work or not. In fact, that movie went through absolute, like, production hell, as they call it. Because, like, there was reshoots, there were straight up, like, editing that went, like, completely out there. The first iteration of the original Star Wars film was so bad that George Lucas and all the producers were like, this is flopping, dude. There's no way we can save this. They literally were like, we spent millions of dollars for something that stinks. And, again, the editors just went through crazy, like, edits. I think George Lucas's wife even mentioned some things to change the whole, like, final act and stuff like that. And then afterwards, they just made a movie that worked. It was groundbreaking at the time. I always like to describe it like this because some people don't really realize what Star Wars was at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Because the closest thing in comparison was Star Trek, where everything was clean cut. It was very political. It was very much like, all right, let's do space exploration and stuff like that, and like reversing all against all these aliens and stuff. And Star Wars first hits you with, no, this is war. We're in wartime right now. We're under like, we have a tyrannical government ahead of us right now.
Can I just throw a diss at the Star Trek fans out there and at the Trekkies? I always like to say,
Oh,
since you brought up Star Trek for the comparison, that people who like Star Trek more than Star Wars are people who like quantity over quality. Just saying.
ooh, a spicy take after spicy take from Corbin, man. We should have a counter for how many spicy takes he's
We
had this whole
should.
podcast, dude.
That's gonna be like somebody's gonna be in the comments like, "Oh my gosh, I love Star Trek. How dare you diss it? I like quality. Those are quality."
I was gonna say, I feel like I would like Star Trek. I just haven't watched it yet. I like the concept.
I've
I like the idea of
tried.
space exploration.
I don't know. I don't know.
But either way, so it's like everything was pristine. Everything is clean cut. You know, these guys have like nice hair and stuff like that, and wearing really nice suits and stuff. And it's funny because the first scene of the movie has the rebels who probably the only time they really look the most like Star Trek characters is when they get shot up by these guys in like white armor. And people don't know this, but the special editions and stuff like that and the re-release after re-release have censored Star Wars like incredibly so. I bet you didn't even know this yourself, Corbin, but the original takes of these like if the movie
Hmm.
would actually have like what they do now. Oh, I'll explain what they did before. Is they would literally have like the explosives attached to them, and
Right.
they'll like spark, and you'll see like flames coming out, and it almost seemed like their chest would like explode. Like it's not graphic by any
Yeah.
means, but like it's pretty graphic, especially at the time in comparison to like Star Trek, where it would just be like a pling, oh I got hit, if you even
Right.
see that. But in Star Wars, like they had the explosives attached, and it made it
Hmm.
look like the armor just freaking blew up when they got shot. The new edits that censor that is they will take those specific frames and they'll completely white out a frame or two,
Hmm.
and they'll put a little bright, like they'll make it brighter so you don't really see that there's a hole that was made in that person's body. So the original Star Wars like had those people get shot and you saw them get shot and they like fell over and stuff like that. And then immediately goes to a desert planet where the robots are all gunky and dirty and stuff like that, and the guys in white armor have like dirt all over them too. It's just like that is the 100% opposite of what Star Trek was, which was clean cut,
Hmm.
clean, like sci-fi story. This was gritty. This was darker. This was like wild. I mean, Luke's aunt and uncle literally became burnt corpses.
Right. I remember
Like,
watching that as a kid and like,
yeah, it is just like, you know, like that's wild. But besides that, the music and stuff was amazing. The movie is very, I love to say it this way, because the original Star Wars movie is wonderfully simple. If you want to boil it down, it's King Arthur grabs Excalibur with help of a wizard to go to an evil castle to save the princess. Boom. That's all you needed.
right.
So it's just like it's such a simple story because it's the classic hero's journey. And that's what George Lucas wanted it to be like. He wanted it to be King Arthur in space. That's the best way to describe it. But they put so much money into it. The original plans were going to be it's the only film that they're going to make, but the movie exploded, completely shattered expectations. They thought that they would lose money off of it, if not break even, but they made astronomical like money from it, especially in the toy industry and stuff.
Yeah.
And that's important to mention because George Lucas was very smart. He was a
Hmm.
very smart businessman, and he started the whole like the whole Star Wars toy industry started with the first movie. And he did something that a lot of people didn't even want to do before, and that was put their name attached to these toys. Usually the toys wouldn't even exist, and if they do, they were so minor no one cared about it.
Hmm.
You know, that those toys for like GI Joes and stuff like that, and you know, whatever. But George Lucas says, no, I want a pretty good cut from this, and I want to put like a bunch of toys out there. And not only did they make a lot of money from the movies, But then they made tons of money from the toys too. So George Lucas became like an instant multi-millionaire, and he thought, I'm just going to expand. I'm going to keep expanding. I'm going to work with Steven Spielberg, and I'm going to make another love movie that I want to like make, which is going to be the traditional B movie type of feel. Indiana Jones. I'm going to do that. So I'm going to work with Steven Spielberg. I have a basic plot and script for the next Star Wars movie, and so he gave it to Irvin Kershner, who is going to direct this movie. And this is why I'm starting to transition into Empire and why it's like amazing, is George Lucas pretty much gave, okay, I want this major plot point to happen. So I'm going to let you guys start working on it. So Irvin Kershner and the writers were pretty much like, we have this great world that was given to us. Let's expand on it. Let's work with it. And my apologies.
Okay.
But so they expanded the world in a way that some franchises won't do. And they'll be like, oh, let's just redo the second movie. It's almost like, imagine if we got like The Force Awakens as the sequel to episode 4, the original Star Wars movie. It's this, people would be outraged and be like, it's the same movie, but that's almost what you would have gotten at the time. But you didn't. They expanded on the idea of the Force in a way that brings in new context and stuff like that. They expanded on the Empire stronghold and stuff like that. It's like, well, yeah, like we destroyed the super weapon, right? So we won the war, right? No, they're coming back at you harder than before. They're bringing their entire fleet. In fact, their main general is going after you specifically. You better keep running. And that's the whole movie. The whole movie, they're on the run.
Right.
Like, in the original Star Wars movie, they were like barely on the run and stuff like that. They were like, oh, a small group of guys are being chased down after they infiltrate the super weapon, the super evil castle, whatever, and they blow it up. But the entirety of Empire Strikes Back, they don't have time to breathe. Because, like, from the beginning of that film, the Empire has their entire fleet chasing after them, and they always have the upper hand. And it just leads to this perfect sense of, like, the entire time. And the movie never dulls, ever. It just, like, consistently has something to one-up itself. And it doesn't do anything that, like, disrespects the first film. In fact, it enhances the first film significantly by expanding on these characters that were originally, again, like, simple, but beautifully simple. You knew what you needed to know to get the point across, but now you're starting to expand on these ideas. Now you're starting to realize that Luke is no longer just a poor farm boy. He's starting to get a little cocky. And not only does he get a little bit cocky, but straight up, Yoda and Obi-Wan both tell him at the end of the movie, if you go against Vader, you're going to lose and there's nothing we can do about it. And Luke goes, but I need to save my friends. So movie logic will say, well, he's going to save his friends, right? Right? He gets his arm cut off and he falls off from the ledge after being told that the evil guy is actually his dad. And it's like, oh, and by the way, we're gonna end the film in a few minutes after that, like, acknowledgement, stuff like that. Yeah. It's just like, excuse me, what is happening? Yeah. So it's just like, it's a perfect example of foreshadowing and actually filling in that foreshadowing. Some of the lines were straight up improvised because, the classic I love you, I know scene. Harrison Ford literally said, Irvin, this line sucks. I don't like these lines. So Irvin Kershner says, then say what you think he should say. So, nice. Like, stuff like that just, like, made Empire's, like, dialogue seem a lot more, like, fluid, too. The communications between, there's still some dud lines, of course, and there's still some dud scenes. But for the most part, like, the movie feels way more natural. It feels a lot more engaged. It seems like very energetic, the score is just fantastic too. I mean, it's like the beginning of like the Imperial March and stuff like that, like music that I think will be heard from generations to generations from now. Like it's just like, oh my gosh, like how can I not have this be one of like my top favorite films? Because I honestly think it's one of, I think this one in this case is one of the best films. Period.
Nice.
Especially when it comes to sequels of the time. Like I do think it's one of the best sequels of all time.
Nice. Some high praise.
It is high praise because it is sincerely a great movie. I always say that some people get scared of Star Wars because sometimes people don't understand what's happening a lot,
Yeah.
and that's why to those people I always say watch the first one, and if you like the first one, watch Empire. If you watch those two movies and you're still that's it.
Mm.
Then it's not for you. Period. But I think the original Star Wars movie and Empire Strikes Back have the easiest time for like most audience members, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
Especially older people if they're trying to get into it for the first time. My dad was not interested in Star Wars whatsoever. Then he watched the first two and he was like, "Okay, this isn't too bad." But yeah, some people get scared over because I will say that the original trilogy, especially the first two films, are a lot more simple, straightforward type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They expand, but they're not too demanding. But I would compare the prequels to more like epics. It's because if the original Star Wars is King Arthur and then the prequel trilogy is Greek mythology.
Mm-hmm. I can see that.
There's a lot of stuff going on because it's almost like the storytelling is completely different.
Yeah.
The storytelling of the original films are especially. I keep saying especially the first two because I'm not really. I think that Return of the Jedi is the black sheep of the original trilogy. It's definitely a lot different than the other two.
Yeah.
But the first two are more like traditional films where they have a beginning, they have a middle, they have an end. They just tell you what needs to be told, and you figure out the stuff that you need to. But with the prequels, you need to know this extra stuff that almost seems like it would be unnecessary. Like I don't know. It's just like every little thing that happens in the prequels is supposed to have like big significance. It's like, oh, another political meeting. No, you need to pay attention to this political meeting because like this is apparently like the rules of this universe right now. You need to, you know what I mean? It's like a lot of people don't really expect that from films too much because that's almost like Game of Thrones-esque, where you have to know every little thing. But like in the prequels, like you have to know that stuff.
Right.
It's the difference between hard world setting and then soft world setting.
Yeah.
So I do think that it's very different in that sense. But I'm getting really deep into this Star Wars rabbit hole, and I need to be pulled out again.
All right, I will drop one more hot take about Star Wars.
Do it.
Star Wars, the
Do
original
it.
Star Wars is George Lucas making a better version of Dune. Anyway, moving on.
A better version of Dune.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever read Dune or seen the movie.
Isn't Dune? Didn't that just come out?
No, they're coming out with a new one, which looks way better than the old one. But it's not out yet. December. It was a sci-fi novel that came out before Star Wars, and I really think George Lucas stole like quite a bit from it. And
He stole from a lot. Yeah.
as a Star Wars fan, like, it seems almost wrong to say that, but I'm pretty sure. Like, I listened to the audiobook for Dune, and I was just like, wait a second, this is Star Wars. This is just the original Star Wars. Like,
I was gonna say, Oh,
young
sorry.
young boy who happens to have kind of like magical abilities on a desert planet, like the prophesied hero of the world, the galaxy, basically, fighting evil empire, dictator
Yeah,
person ruling it. Like
that's funny.
it's there's some very similar plot lines and things going on, characters, things like that.
Yeah, you could actually tie a lot of movies to Star Wars,
Yeah.
especially I forget what they're called, but there's a handful of Japanese like movies that George Lucas was like, I'm taking this, I'm taking this, I'm taking this
Yes.
too. The whole like ending bomber run was completely ripped off from a World War II like airplane like movie and stuff like that. It's it's one of those perfect examples of uh don't be afraid to steal
Mm-hmm.
because it may seem like you're stealing, but you're just taking your inspirations and making it your own. I'm telling you right now, have you ever heard Holst and his music with the planets?
I don't know.
It's Star Wars.
Maybe I have heard
Holst.
that. That
Yeah,
sounds really familiar.
I was gonna say, I might even link you some Holst songs, and you'll be like, "That's just Star Wars," and it is. It is Star Wars. Literally, like John Williams is a brilliant composer, one of my favorites, and he literally said, "How do I portray space? By going to a guy who I adore that already made music about the planets."
Yeah,
So it's
that's
just like
awesome.
that's how I do it. So it's just like, yeah, almost like Star Wars is a compilation of things that made the creators want to create. And you
Right.
can say that about anyone. I mean, I can talk about the Beatles right now because I love the Beatles. But the Beatles is just a combination of like the old rock and roll, blues,
Mm-hmm.
and like a little bit of the soul music that was going on in America, and they just made it their own. And people are like, oh, they're so unique and stuff. It's like, no, there's like five different genres put together.
Right.
It's just like, yeah, Star Wars is so unique. It's like, yeah, but it's like five or six different movies with music just together. It's like,
I think there's some interesting like uh, effects of that, which basically boil down to, say Star Wars did steal a lot from Dune. Well, Dune was released as a movie in like the 70s or 80s, and it's an awful movie. Like, it's just poorly made, terribly portrayed characters, awful movie, awful special effects. And part of it was because they just didn't have what they needed to portray it properly.
mm,
Well, Star Wars steals from Dune essentially, builds this massive empire. George Lucas has like what Lucas Art and Lights or whatever or something like that. Um,
yeah,
some I forget what it's called. Something Art and Lights and Magic Art. I don't know. Something. I don't know. Created this giant company that like pushed the boundaries of like technological like graphics and in movies and stuff, motion graphics and stuff, and lighting. Industrial Lights and Magic, that's what it's called. ILM.
okay, yeah,
And like essentially pushed the like the bar up for what you could do in movies. And now Dune is coming out in I think December, and it looks amazing. And it's
mm,
like really they have George Lucas to thank for that, because he stole the original, or partially, it's not all Dune, but,
yeah.
stole from them, created this giant company that, eventually pushed the bar so that they could create what they need to create now. And it's like there's an interesting, like, symbiotic relationship going on there or something.
Yeah, that's funny. I think because 2001: A Space Odyssey does a lot of stuff that Star Wars did too.
Hmm.
And 2001: Space Odyssey did come first, especially with this work with miniatures and stuff.
Right.
And I think George Lucas, in this case, will be, I would describe as like the Henry Ford of effects.
Yeah, exactly.
Because because Stanley Kubrick and stuff was doing this stuff with 2001: A Space Odyssey, which, by the way, it still looks incredible nowadays. Like, if you look at 2001: A Space Odyssey, like, those special effects are pretty much identical to what Star Wars did, but, like, it still looks really good. But the point is that George Lucas was taking these techniques and stuff as well and made it so accessible to most people. Again, just another example of George Lucas being a brilliant businessman.
Yeah.
Because, like, he had the foresight to be like, oh, most people are going to want to do this now. Because even though 2001: A Space Odyssey is in a way, like, I think 2001: A Space Odyssey is more like respected amongst like critic community, not really super popular with the people. So when Star Wars came out, which is much more popular with the people, and there was critics that were okay with it too, but like, you know, there's always that duality.
Yeah.
of but yeah, with the population being a lot more exposed to this stuff now, George Lucas was like, okay, we're gonna make businesses on it and we're gonna help other people do this stuff too.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's why I say he's like the Henry Ford of those kind of effects, because it's like they're not completely original, but I'm making it in a way that you can do it too.
That's awesome.
So yeah, no, it's really cool. I love this stuff, as you can tell.
I do too. All right. Well, we're getting pretty close to. Well, I mean, we're almost an hour 15.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
I will share a quick third favorite movie, and then we can wrap it up.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
No, you're fine. I wanted to talk Star Wars too. I love talking Star Wars. There's so much to chat about there. But my third favorite movie is also one that I think pushed the bar a little bit for what can be done and how things should be done, while also at the same time not being in a new genre at all. And third one comes from my favorite director of all time. Again, favorite, not necessarily best, but
Sure.
Wes Anderson.
Hey, nice. Okay.
I love me some Wes Anderson movies, but I would say my third favorite movie is probably Fantastic Mr. Fox.
That's a solid one.
It's an amazing movie, and like the amount of detail and work that goes into that kind of movie, because it's a claymation. So for those of you at home who may not be familiar, claymation is clay figures, and it is shot in a series of photographs, frame by frame. And if you're familiar with television or movies or whatever, movies in general are shot at 24 frames per second. So you have to think, for every 1 second of a movie, 24 photographs. And they're going frame by frame. Now, I can't remember if Fantastic Mr. Fox was shot in 24 frames per second, or, you know, assembled to be 24. Because I know a lot of animation is actually 12. But still, you have to think, like, 12 frames per second for 60 seconds in a minute for 2-hour movie is thousands of frames.
I was going to say, we're talking about animation here, and that's my expertise.
Nice.
But yeah, it's a lot of animators will do 12s, if not less than that. Actually, some people can get away with 8. Hard, but they can.
Right.
But yeah, no, that's even if you're doing just bare minimum to try to like sneak past with 8, that's 8 individual drawings or photographs of something per 1 second. 12 of those per second. And I think one of the only animated films I can think of that does in ones is a passion project that this one crazy animator had. I completely forget his name. And he was making The Thief and the Cobbler. And he spent 20 years on that film for it not to be finished.
No.
It never actually got finished officially. What happened was Miramax actually took the rights and completely took all of his stuff and put a narrator over it, did a lot of shorthand like tricks and stuff like that, and did a lot of terrible voice acting, and made that film garbage. And this man
Dang.
spent 20 plus years on it just for it to never be completed.
That's awful.
But
That sucks.
another film that does on that animates on ones, and that means 24 frames a second, and that's Akira, which is another brilliantly animated movie. But no, yeah, you're saying that when it comes to claymation too.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about drawings because that's what I
Right.
like to do because I'm an animator in that way. But with claymation, it's just like you get like this remote here, and you go, snap, here's a picture, and then barely move it. Snap, that's a picture. Snap, that's a picture. Snap, that's a picture. Snap that just for like, woo. Okay, there's 24 pictures right there
Yep.
just to do that, and it's like, wow.
It's an insane amount of work. And not only that,
Oh, yeah.
like with Fantastic Mr. Fox, I mean, first of all, you have to think voice actors. You're going to have, syncing up voice actors to photos, not video. I mean, it will be video by the time it's assembled and they start working on it. But on top of that, they went to Roald Dahl's house and actually like took out the furniture like piece by piece to photograph, because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he's the author of Fantastic Mr. Fox, Roald Dahl. He wrote a lot of, I think he wrote James and the Giant Peach and some of the other ones, if I'm not
BFG as well.
Yeah, I think so. And so they actually went to his house, if I remember correctly, and they took out each piece of furniture and photographed it, and like piece by piece, so that they could assemble the movie inside this world that would have been his world.
Wow.
Like, it's just an insane amount of work, and the detail, and it creates this masterpiece where when you watch it, you're just like, that was so weird, but I love it.
Yeah, no, that's Wes Anderson for you. I really love Wes Anderson movies. He's another one of those examples of really down to earth kind of writer and director. Like I like Wes Anderson a lot too.
He
so
just
it's
he
when
thinks
you mentioned
so
him,
deeply.
I was like, yeah.
Yeah. Like he does so much, thinking so much more deeply about what each thing means in the movie. Like if you watch The Grand Budapest Hotel, have you seen that one?
I have not actually.
It's fascinating, but it jumps between different timelines. So like one might be in the 50s, one might be in the 60s, 70s, 80s maybe, I'm not sure. But as it moves, the aspect ratio changes. So like it might be
cool.
1-1 like square, and then it's like 4-3, and then it's like 16-9, and then it's like 1-1. Then it's like 16:9. Then it's back to 4:3, and like so, depending on the time you're watching, the aspect ratio will change.
That's so cool.
Isn't that wild?
That's really cool.
Like the amount of
that.
thought that goes into doing something like that, and he just did that all throughout Fantastic Mr. Fox too. Not the aspect ratio, but just like putting in insane levels of detail and thought, camera movements, character movements, animations. And just making it quirky and fun. It's just blows my mind. I wish I had that kind of patience.
For sure. Or that time to even do it.
Right.
But I was going to say, to those who don't know what aspect ratio is, especially if you're older, remember how TVs used to look a lot smaller? And sometimes they wide and sometimes they short. Aspect ratio is pretty much the dimensions of the picture that you see on screen. So if you have a widescreen television, you have shorter on the top and then super long, but then sometimes you have what they call a full screen where it's just more blockish. So everything's just more blocky. It's no longer elongated. It's shorter. And think of those old like CRT TVs or something like that where like the square is just like super tiny and it's literally just a square. So aspect ratio would be how it looks within a certain like television. So, yeah, that's just a quick aside in case someone is just like, they're all talking about ratio. This is ratio, dude. This is based.
What is this math?
This is math. I hate math. I flunked math.
Yeah,
I thought we're talking about movies, not math.
that's right. But yeah, that's my third favorite movie, I would say. And pretty much
Nice.
anything by Wes Anderson in that, you know, by that token, like they almost all of them hold a similar spot in my heart. But yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I like it. Man, we've been going on for a very long time.
We
Colton.
have. Well,
And I was worried that this was going to happen when you said, "Oh, we're talking about movies today." I'm like, "Well, yeah, here we go."
hey, but at least like it's fun and it's something we can talk about for a long time, you know?
Oh yeah.
So, all right. Well, I guess we should wrap it up on that note. Thank you so much, everybody watching at home. If you've made it this far, consider smashing that subscribe button over somewhere over there, and ring the bell. You know, you need to know when we go live. You just need to know. I don't know. What can I say? No, I'm kidding. Don't ring the bell if you don't want to. Live a notification-free life. It's probably nice. I can imagine.
Gosh, you know what I mean? It's just so much nicer when you don't know when your favorite content creators are posting new videos and we're in live.
So much nicer. Anyway, on that note of sarcasm, this has been Corbin LaFawn, Richie Swift, coming at you live with another Cafe Vodcast. We'll be back when we're back. Who knows? Probably in the next couple weeks, I would assume. Usually on a Wednesday night. So, thanks so much for watching, guys, and we will see you in the next one. Roll the outro. All right, and ending in 3. Wait.